This is a Global News special presentation.
Welcome to Global's Profiles in Courage. I'm Su-Ling Goh. This is our annual look back at some of the most inspiring Albertans of the year, and what a year it was. If you need a lift, even some perspective, these are stories about overcoming overwhelming health challenges and making a difference. Now, remember the beginning of 2020, before we'd ever heard of COVID-19? That was when we met Ava deGannes. She was 15, almost 16, and had already endured 5 major surgeries. But Ava's attitude is all about looking on the bright side. She says being an oncology patient has allowed her to meet a lot of people, make great friends, and even score a special pet.
Ava deGannes' dog, Thor, was born with 3 legs. When his breeder advertised a search for a worthy family, this 15-year-old won the chance to adopt him.
He'll jump off the couch and he'll like trip a little bit because he only has 3 legs, fall on his face. He'll be like, okay, and then just start, keep running again.
Ava can relate. When she was 12, she had severe pain in her right leg. It turned out to be bone cancer.
I was just so taken aback. I did not. That was the last thing in the world, the very last thing that I would expect for someone to tell me.
Surgeons at the Stollery Children's Hospital removed her tibia bone, zapped it with radiation, and put it back in. They also replaced Ava's knee, but the cancer was also in her lungs, which led to 3 more surgeries, plus months of chemotherapy. She says without all that, she never would have met some amazing friends.
Meeting the little kids, they're all they're just so happy, and it makes me happy. And then I meet someone my own age, and we're just talking about, oh my God, our hair's gone, but we look so good, we're still super stylish.
In 2018, Ava won the Stollery Superstar Award for helping her school to raise $12,000 for the hospital. In 2019, her cancer came back, this time in her wrist. At first, doctors said they'd have to amputate. Then they came up with a better solution.
They cut out the tumor, replaced it with my fibula, put a big plate, put in some screws and a partial fusion, so I can still move my wrist, obviously not as much as the other one. And then sewed me back up, and I was done.
Ava got Thor around the same time as her wrist procedure. She says he'd be an excellent therapy dog, and she wants to be a pediatric surgeon, helping kids with her hands and her heart.
Being happy just makes everything so much better.
Sure does. Ava started high school this year and got her dream job at a bakery. She had 2 surgeries and remains cancer-free. Now, this story shocked Edmontonians, the random shooting of a young man who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But what surprised us even more was how resilient that person turned out to be. His name is Herman Koo, and his medical team says he inspires everyone he meets.
The K9 guys, I just lost a tire.
In March of 2018, a violent crime spree in Edmonton ended with a high-speed chase and the random shooting of an innocent person. Herman Koo was shot in the head while he was driving home. His parents woke up to 2 police officers at the door.
He said my son is in the hospital. They don't think he's going to make it. I actually cried on the police shoulder. And they said it was okay.
The bullet had fragmented in Herman's brain, too dangerous to remove. Doctors told his family to prepare for the worst.
They were going to give up. But then, I guess for some reason, God's help, and he made it. He made it through, I guess.
You got it, Herman.
2 years later, this 40-year-old is doing everything no one expected him to do: walking, eating, and talking.
I speak clear as possible.
This injury impacted basically everything to do with speech and swallowing.
Herman says the hardest part of rehabilitation at the Glenrose Hospital was learning to speak, coordinating his mouth muscles and coming up with words.
Lobster.
Lobster.
Perfect. Nice and crisp.
His brain also had to remember basic skills like counting money. He had no idea how to use a calculator. The therapy team noticed Herman inspiring others to work harder.
Other patients came to know his story, and they would sometimes remark to me that they were just, quite impressed with how well he was doing, considering how grievous of an injury he had.
Just that grin, like he was always smiling, just cruising along, doing whatever. I think that having someone like that on the unit just helps everyone.
Herman explains he doesn't focus on the past, only the future. His dream is to go back to work as a pipeline control room operator, but he has met one big goal.
I drive now.
How's that?
Oh man, it's the greatest thing ever. And I don't speed.
No matter where the road leads, his dad will be by his side.
I think he's very optimistic. Sometimes I feel, maybe you should think twice, but he's just, okay, that's what happened.
I get up with a smile every day, no matter the day, thinking it's okay to be me.
Staff of the Glenrose Rehabilitation Hospital presented Herman with a Courage Award, well deserved. Well, coming up at 81 years old, he survived COVID-19. When this local senior went to the hospital because he couldn't breathe, his family didn't know if they'd ever see him again. Plus, a Humboldt Bronco crash survivor shares advice about staying positive during the pandemic. Stay with us. Welcome back to Profiles in Courage, Global's annual look back at some of the most inspiring Albertans of the year. Now, Edmonton's Bill Maxim earned a new nickname in 2020, Miracle Man. Not only did the 81-year-old beat a severe case of COVID-19, he did it with no family or friends by his side.
Gardening is one of the many things Bill Maxim will never take for granted again. In March, he almost died after what he thought was a cold.
So I got some cough medicine, and then a couple of days later, I was in an ambulance.
Bill doesn't remember telling his wife he couldn't breathe. He vaguely recalls the intensive care unit being hooked up to a ventilator.
I had the COVID, I had pneumonia, and I had blood clots on all 5 lobes of my lungs, so I guess that's why they figured that I was really in bad shape.
There was always that chance he would never wake up, and that's the thing that scared us the most.
At 81 years old, Bill's chance of surviving COVID-19 was 20%, according to his doctors, and visitor restrictions at the time meant he'd be fighting alone. But 5 weeks later, he was well enough for rehab at the Glenrose Hospital.
I says, well, my goal is to get out of here as fast as I can, get this oxygen tank off my back, and take this walker out of here.
And up straight in front of you.
Bill's lungs were in rough shape. He could barely walk, and his hands were too weak to hold a fork.
Like, his grip strength was a quarter of what I would have expected a man of his age and size to be.
Complicating things, he was the Glenrose's first COVID-19 patient.
Because everything was so new and we weren't sure and everything was changing every other day, there was a fear of when we were working with him, did we have to gown up?
But testing showed Bill was no longer infectious. His therapist's joke, only his laugh was contagious.
Oh, he is so lovely, so dedicated. He kind of kept me in line sometimes. He'd be like, Haley, I was there at 1 on the nose, where were you?
Bill says the staff and patients became his family when he couldn't see the real thing. Finally, in June, nearly 2.5 months after leaving his house in an ambulance, he was able to go home.
How did that feel, walking out of there?
Oh, great. Yeah, it felt great. But I really missed them.
His family had a t-shirt made, The Miracle Man. They have no idea where Bill got the coronavirus, but they hope his story can remind others to be safe.
I can't imagine being in his shoes, let alone having another family member go through what we went through. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
Bill still needs regular lung function and blood tests. He is participating in COVID-19 research. Of course, not everyone with COVID-19 has been so lucky. Hundreds of Albertans have died this year because of an infection that is preventable. And that's why some families who lost loved ones and some survivors have bravely spoken up to help save others.
When Edmonton jazzman Bobby Cairns died in hospital of COVID-19, visitor restrictions meant his family couldn't be with him, but his music was.
He passed peacefully, listening to we had the nurse put on, the kind of jazz that he likes, and tried to give him the best send-off that we could.
Bobby's family is one of many who went public during an incredibly dark time to shine a light on the realities of COVID-19.
For a long time before she passed away, she would tell me she didn't want to die alone over and over again.
My dad said to look after Mom after I die. And I guess I didn't do a good job of that for them.
But maybe he had more months. And I would take more months. I would take more hugs. I would take more another Christmas.
My dad had a private room. He had amazing staff, and it still happened to him.
COVID also happened to this 40-year-old, Ricky Lamb. He documented his symptoms in detail on social media until the day before he died.
How quickly someone can deteriorate with this virus, and someone who is typically so healthy and just full of energy.
19-year-old Alyssa Smith thought the virus might kill her. She warned others her age to stay safe.
If you think you'll be fine, I'd rethink that, because it's a lot worse than people think.
The stigma of COVID can be just as bad and worse than the virus itself.
And at the risk of becoming an outcast in her small community, Deb Leniak came forward to ask everyone to be kind.
You don't know who has it, and you don't know who's next to get it. So an ounce of human kindness goes a very, very long way.
Psychology experts say COVID-19 is causing a second pandemic, a wave of mental health issues. And a young man who survived one of the worst tragedies in modern Canadian history has a bit of advice for those who are struggling. Former Humboldt Bronco, Tyler Smith.
We came to the rink every day and we knew that it was truly a great day to be a Bronco no matter what.
As one of the 13 survivors of the bus crash that killed 16 people, former Humboldt Bronco Tyler Smith knows he may never fully heal.
I'm still trying to figure out what truly works for me, because it feels like the accident was yesterday.
Tyler was seriously injured in the 2018 collision. He still has nerve damage to his left hand, but the emotional trauma affects him the most. A few months after the crash, depression sunk in.
That numbness kind of triggers into a spiral down effect. It did for me, at least, where you just bottle up all these emotions and you just put them on the back burner, and then obviously there's going to be a time when it comes out.
He managed to return to the Broncos to play 10 games. That's when he realized he needed to go home to Leduc to focus on his mental health.
And actually start to figure out ways to recover and figure out ways that work best for me to heal, and realize that it's not just a one-day thing, that this is going to be a lifetime thing.
Exercise, counseling, and writing in his journal have helped. The 22-year-old also started public speaking and studying broadcasting at NAIT. But the pandemic has changed life for him and all his friends.
I think right now, a lot of people our age are getting to a point where they're starting to lose it a little, and they just don't know what to do.
Tyler says people in their 20s tend to focus on what's next, in school, in their careers, in their relationships. That's why isolating can be tough. His advice? Try to be grateful for what you have right now.
Whether it be a good or a bad day, you just have to embrace that day and try to live in the present and try to figure out what's going to work for you that day.
Now, you may have noticed Tyler's shirt, which said, "Not alone, it's okay to not be okay." He started a clothing line with part of the proceeds going to mental health organizations. Well, we'll take a quick break, but stay with us. One Alberta family with its share of loss is now coping with more. Their important message for parents. And later, how this 9-year-old finds the fun in life despite a life-changing tragedy. Welcome back to Profiles in Courage. One Edmonton family that's already been hit hard by cancer has had a devastating few months. Their baby boy was diagnosed with a rare cancer in both eyes, but they wanted to share their difficult story to warn other parents about a certain symptom.
Hi.
Staring into his boy's big, beautiful eyes, Brady Cook noticed a strange spot in his pupils. After a flurry of referrals and tests, baby Mason was diagnosed with a rare eye cancer, retinoblastoma.
Literally 2 weeks ago, we were enjoying life as if nothing was wrong. And on Monday, my son had his left eye removed.
The family is now in Toronto, where Mason has had 2 chemotherapy treatments in hopes of saving his right eye.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot.
Unfortunately, cancer has broken both parents' hearts before. Alyssa was 9 when she lost her mom to breast cancer. Brady's loss was more public. His brother Matt Cook passed away 10 years ago.
Being able to share my love, respect, and gratitude for both my brother and my family has been the greatest honor of my life.
After bone cancer took Matt's leg, he joined Canada's national sledge hockey team. Then at 22, he died of lung cancer.
It's just too much, too fast, too soon in so many ways.
Their mother, Lynn, says what has helped their family over the years is helping others. The Matt Cook Foundation does fundraisers for young adults fighting cancer. Now their community is giving back by raising money for Mason's medical bills and travel to and from Toronto.
The word heartwarming doesn't do justice to the outpouring of love and support.
Brady and Alyssa are doing their best to support their son, but they say so far, Mason is comforting them.
It was just the most powerful moment of my life when right before the nurse had administered the chemotherapy, he looked up at us and gave us his first legitimate smile.
Mason will need follow-ups in Toronto every 3 weeks for at least the next 2 years. Now, since that story aired in August, he has had 4 rounds of chemotherapy. 2 were successful in shrinking his tumor. Now his doctors are trying laser therapy. Mason's parents say he laughs and smiles every day, all day long. Well, earlier this year, 2 burn survivors started a mission to educate students about preventing fire-related injuries.
And when the chemical ignited, it filled the entire room with flames.
Spencer Beach and Kelly Filardo spoke to staff and students at Constable Daniel Woodall's school. Spencer was severely burned in a flash fire while fixing some flooring in 2003. Kelly was 2 when a spark from a burning barrel lit her dress on fire. Both suffered from years of pain and depression, and both had messages about self-esteem and measuring your risks.
The difference of what it means to get hurt or stop an injury from listening to that voice, and what it means to stop yourself from succeeding from listening to that voice, so that you could actually grow and at the same time not get injured.
I used to look in the mirror and say, yuck, who's going to love that? I'm just covered in ugly scars. Nobody's going to want to marry me. Nobody's going to want to kiss me. I will never be beautiful.
I learned how to look at yourself in the mirror and think about yourself, how beautiful you are.
Spencer's son, Aiden, introduced him at the talk. They also raised money for the Edmonton firefighters' burn unit at the U of A hospital. Coming up after darkness comes this amazing bright smile. This young man can lift anyone's spirits despite everything he's been through. Stay with us. Finally tonight, a 9-year-old boy who survived the impossible. He spent over a year in hospital, surprising his medical teams with not only his recovery, but his hard work and amazing attitude.
Ian Sherbakov loves to make people laugh.
He loves being goofy. He loves joking. So if he can get one over on you, he will do it.
Many say Ian is a miracle. In 2018, 2 days before Christmas, he was in a devastating highway crash. Ian was airlifted to the Stollery Children's Hospital, where he fought for his life for 4 months.
Just laying there and he's not really moving, not breathing on his own, so it's very hard to look at, but yeah, I remember.
So he had to have surgery in the Stollery to remove a piece of his skull and take that bleeding out, and then that piece of his skull was put back on.
The entire left side of his brain was severely damaged, which affected the entire right side of his body. He couldn't walk, speak, or eat, and was transferred to the Glenrose Hospital for rehabilitation.
So he wasn't super responsive or even very alert to his environment at that point.
Black. Red. No, you're not red.
Therapists worked with Ian to get his body moving and his mouth to start forming words again. Extremely frustrating for a 9-year-old.
And you could see him really want to interact with peers on the unit. He was making friends, but he could not have those joking back and forth.
After a year of intense work at the Glenrose, Ian was forced to move home early due to COVID-19 restrictions in March. Virtual sessions and his dad continued to help him progress.
Anybody can tell him what to do, but he's the one who has to push through. And he did. He pushed himself. And he got to where he's at, and he keeps pushing.
My name, Ian.
Ian can walk with a cane, eat on his own, communicate with his voice and his hands. He's going back to school.
He pretty much surpassed any kind of idea we might have had or prognosis we had, just given the severity of his injury.
He's amazing. Amazing. Like, truly, his determination inspires us all.
You remember this? Yeah.
His dad says his boy is stubborn in a good way, and he's nowhere near done.
Oh, he's what keeps me going.
Such a sweetheart. Now, Ian had another surgery last month to replace part of his skull with a prosthetic flap. His dad said he treated that major surgery like a visit, just happy the whole time. Well, thank you so much for joining us for Profiles in Courage. We hope all these stories touched you as much as they inspired us. Happy